Episode 4 of Apple TV Plus Servant Season 2 is titled 2 O'Clock. With a new guest in the house, Dorothy resorts to bold tactics to get what she wants. What's going on, everybody, and welcome back to my channel, Movie Files. Elliot back again with my weekly recap, breakdown, and review of the latest episode of Servant Season 2, Episode 4, titled 2 a.m., and a lot of crazy things happen at 2 a.m., especially with Dorothy. I think it's safe to say that she remembers some things. And also, Sean can remember some things in this episode. And we're going to break it all down in this spoiler discussion. But before we dive into it, as you can see on the screen now, make sure you're following me on all my other social media accounts, which you can find all those links in the description below. If you are new to the channel, welcome to the community. Consider subscribing. And while you're at it, hit the bell so you can get the notification when I drop new content. It would mean a lot to me if you all can like and share this review. It really helps out the channel, but I also appreciate all the support in the comments. I love discussing this show with you all, so let's talk about this newest episode of Servant. What do we think about Dorothy and her tactics and her remembering what she might have done to Jericho? We got Sean getting his taste and his feeling back with Dorothy and Leanne in the same house. Is it that the reason why a lot of Dorothy's memory is coming back, or something else? Let's discuss it all. And again, let me know your pros, your cons, and your theories for the weeks ahead. But just get into this review, just my initial thoughts before I get into the recap. I really enjoyed this episode. I said it last week that I felt like episode 3 was like the true launching pad for this new season, versus like the first 2 episodes was more or less just a carryover from season 1 to 2. But Pizza being a great episode, directed by M. Night's daughter. M. Night is back directing the hell out of this episode. I love that kind of connection from Pizza to this episode. And again, this episode's dark. It's directed beautifully. There's some incredible shots. And again, some really big moments with Sean, with Dorothy, with Leanne. So much to break down. But I like I said, last week was great. This week is great. I feel like the season's now starting to pick up and we're starting to get answers. We're starting to get more mystery, but we're also starting to get some great moments with these characters. So let me know your thoughts in the comments, your overall thoughts, your pros and cons. Let's discuss it in the comment section. So let's get this thing off with the recap. As the episode opens up, again, we get a shot of Dorothy's feet, which I mentioned last week. I think all these shots of her feet is she's finally standing up for herself. She's standing on her own 2 feet, making some bad decisions, but some decisions that she feels comfortable with as she goes upstairs. And she now has Leanne captive. She's kidnapped Leanne. She's bringing her food, and she asks her where Jericho is, and Leanne says, "I don't know." And she says, "Well, you're going to stay up here until you remember," and we'll talk about more of these scenes between Dorothy and Leanne. We cut to the next scene as Dorothy stands on her decision, and she's talking to Sean about what she's doing and how she compares to her tactics to when she did a piece on people in their recovery stages. Like, you got to keep hitting them. You got to force it out of them. Again, Dorothy is just so interesting to see this new turn, to see this kind of the decision makings that she's making. And she's literally willing to risk her job, her career. And it's so interesting with Dorothy. She can see people's flaws. As she mentioned, she did a piece on people recovering addicts, but she can't see her flaws until this episode, which again, I don't know if it's a matter of Leanne being in that house is making her remember, if Leanne's working some type of magical powers and her powers on her. Let me know your thoughts on why is it that we think Dorothy is now regaining her memory. And also something to remember too that I put in my notes here, it's very interesting to see this change in Dorothy from being helpless from the end of episode 1. She wasn't eating, she wasn't sleeping, to fast forward to this latest episode. She's now going back to work. She has this confidence about her. I feel like she's getting closer to figuring out where Jericho is. And again, she's holding someone against their will in the attic. She's able to eat these eggs. Again, this is really, really interesting, this new change in character. I'm liking this change. Again, I'm not agreeing to this decisions that Dorothy makes, but I'm really liking this kind of character arc that we're getting with her. But going back to the recap, Sean is told not to go upstairs because he's kind of weak-minded. He's not strong. It's very funny hearing that from Dorothy being weak-minded. But we see that the builders arrive to fix the basement, which we'll talk about the builders here in a second. But we get this emphasis of the shot of the basement. Again, goes back to my theory that I had mentioned last week regarding a comment that I read about someone believing that what if the Lesser Saints are in the basement? What if they are underground and they're going to make their way up to the Turner's house? We talked about it last week, but let me know, again, the emphasis on the basement versus the attic. Is there some type of connections, heaven versus hell? Let me know your thoughts. But for the very first time, we finally spend some time with Leanne in this episode. We see that she's in the attic. She's kind of making herself accustomed to the place that she's going to be captive. She grabs a radio out of the kind of the Turner situation, and we see that the time is at 9:04, and it switches to 9:05. Again, this clock is very important in this episode because 2 a.m. is where things get crazy. We cut to Julian Leanne questioning this whole situation. He believes that this is not right what Dorothy's doing, of course, and that he believes that Leanne is spilling stuff to Dorothy that's probably not good for her mental state, which that isn't really the case, but we know that Leanne and Dorothy do not need to be in the same area. We get this quick shot of Dorothy coming back home from work, or I should say at work, and she mentions that she's doing this piece on defining gravity, and she mentions Peter Pan, the story of Peter Pan, which I found to be interesting because if you all know, the story of Peter Pan is essentially it's a made-up story, and it makes me think there's some type of connections in regards to making up stories. We know Sean made up the story about the situation. We know that Leanne's making up certain things. We know that Dorothy, so it's an interesting connection that kind of, not necessarily a throwaway line, but I thought that there were some interesting parallels between Peter Pan being mentioned and the storytelling that a lot of our characters do to one another. We get this really interesting moment with Dorothy. I mentioned the builders earlier. She comes home from work. The builders don't say anything to her, like, hi, ma'am, we're almost done with the basement. They just walk right past her, and Dorothy even looks at them. I wonder if those workers are somehow connected to the Lesser Saints, like they're posing as these equipment workers. I don't know how they would have figured out that Sean and them needed repairs, except they're the ones that did the damage, so that maybe makes sense that they would know that they need repairs. But I wonder if those workers are doing something in regards to making it more easier for the Lesser Saints to come into the house or to let this presence into the house. So let me know if you all think that those builders are actually builders. So back to the recap. Leanne tells Dorothy that the family that she left needs her. She has a commitment to them, as Dorothy just kind of shuts it down and said, you have a commitment to us, and they have their back and forth again. I really loved the scenes between Dorothy and Leanne in this episode. And again, it's just really fascinating to me that Leanne has yet to tell Dorothy what she did. I wonder why she's holding back, why she's reserving that information. She doesn't just tell her the truth. I think it's going to come sooner rather than later. I think that she finds out by this episode the truth. I don't know if that has anything to do with Leanne and praying and things of that nature, but again, I love the scene between those two characters. We get this really, again, I talked about the direction of M. Night. We get this sweeping shot going through the house. It almost feels like there was a ghost in the house. And again, I don't know if this is a metaphor of Dorothy's kind of conscience coming back, her memory coming back, because again, we get a lot of moments in this episode when once it hits 2 a.m., which I can't remember if there was some type of significance of 2 a.m. last season. Let me know if I'm forgetting something, but I don't know. I know there's if you look up like a spiritual reason behind 2 a.m., there's things between like when people wake up at a certain time at night, or if there's a certain time at the clock, it's some spiritual meaning, but I couldn't really dive deep into the connection of did something happen last year at 2 a.m. and the significance of that in this episode, but let me know your thoughts there. But we get our first moment of Dorothy waking up at 2 a.m., asking Leanne where Jericho is, and she grabs her hand and gives her pain and like kind of puts her in pain and really grabs her hand really tightly. But as soon as it hits 2:01, she goes back to her room and almost like nothing happens. So again, by the end of the episode, we kind of understand that she's getting her memory back, but I don't know that significance of 2 a.m. Again, let me know in the comments, but back to the recap. We get a really interesting moment here as Dorothy gives Leanne breakfast, and she's talking about the decorations, like take care of the decorations. They've been here for a very long time, and I'm surprised they work. I don't know if that has anything, that line there alludes to what Leanne's able to bring things back to life. I don't know if I'm looking too much into that line, but back to Leanne requesting to speak to Sean, and Dorothy cuts that off, and she cuts deep. She says, you're not going to break us. We're a true family. You never had a family. Again, Dorothy was just going in at Leanne in this episode. But we get another shot of the basement from the ground up as we see Sean trying to find keys into the attic, which he eventually does. He goes to the attic, and I forgot how much I miss Sean and Leanne having conversations, especially conversations over food. But he talks to Leanne. He finally gets a chance to talk to her. They're briefly talking about this mannequin, aka a doll, Leanne's bringing her to life. She gives her a name very similar to the doll in Jericho, some parallels there. But we cut to, she asks why Sean hasn't told her. And she says to her she deserves everything she has coming to her, as Sean allows her to use the bathroom in order to get some information about Jericho. We cut to the bathroom, which we see some gaugs and some scissors. At first, I assumed that was Sean, re-oiling or putting ointment on his hand. But for a second there, I'm like, was that Leanne? Because the reason I say that, and it was a comment that I talked to on the channel last week, Do you all think that Leanne's pregnant by chance? Again, I know that was Sean's hand, fixing his hand and all that, but for a second I thought it was like Leanne kind of covering up her baby bump, but it was weird. We were talking about last week. If you all look at that scene last week when Leanne was eating that pizza, it looked like she was a little bit bigger in a sense. Again, if she's pregnant, that would be insane, but let me know your thoughts on that. But nonetheless, we see Leanne goes back to the attic and she finds that there's a Bible there for her. Sean left that in her room. Cut to, I don't know if this was like comedic relief or there's like a deeper undertone, but we get that chicken fighting scene. I don't know if this episode was written through, I don't know if you all remember the Popeye chicken craze. I don't know if that had any correlation of like just being funny and adding a little bit of levity to the situation. If you all follow M. Night's career, he always throws in like a little bit of hint of like opera comedy, some weird comedy. So I don't know if that was a comedic beat or if there was more meaning to those people fighting over chicken. Let me know your thoughts on that scene. I really haven't pieced that together yet. It could just be a throwaway line. But yet again, we go back to 2 a.m. Dorothy goes upstairs, and this time she wasn't playing games. She drags Leanne by her hair on the floor as Leanne's screaming. She even chokes her at one point. Eventually lets her go, goes back to bed like nothing happened. Again, these 2 a.m. recurrences are her remembering the tragedy of Jericho and finding someone to blame, that being Leanne. Go to a very interesting scene here as Leanne explains to Sean what she thinks her body's going through at 2 a.m., that she thinks her body is trying to have her remember something. Remember what she did to Jericho. I don't know the technical term of what she's going through, this kind of body trauma of just like hitting you. We've all had those moments where we've had a tough moment, we lost someone, and just out of nowhere, we can just get these rushes of emotion. I don't know what the medical term of that is, but we're seeing that that Dorothy is really going through some trauma right now, especially at this 2 a.m. time. See Sean talking to Leanne about them, why they decided to have kids in their late 30s, and Leanne's just like, I don't care what you're saying. I'm not going to care for Dorothy. You can give me this sweeping cry story. She is not a good person. We get a great moment of where Sean asks Leanne, just tell me where Jericho is. And she says, Jericho's dead. I love that acting moment. Again, those scenes, Leanne being back in the mix just makes me happy because whenever she's talking to Sean, talking to Dorothy, it just adds more gravitas to the situation. So we see Julian's over at the house putting some herbs in their food. And this is a really important scene here because we see Leanne praying and she cuts to the page where Sean's name was on it. And we see the scene kind of plays out as Sean is starting to realize, oh, what did you put in your recipe? Well, lo and behold, Sean now has his taste back, which was weird to me that he wouldn't immediately notice that he had his taste back after missing his taste for months, and he's a chef, so really interesting moment, but he finally is getting his taste back. Leanne is helping him out because he's helping her out. We all know that Leanne and Sean have a better relationship than Dorothy, no less, but he now has his taste back. Is he going to get his feelings back? We'll talk about that later, but yet again, we get a 2 a.m. scene. This time they don't show us what Leanne or Dorothy did to Leanne, but it sounded like it hurt. But we see that she goes back and runs off like nothing happened again. And honestly, like I said, I forgot how much I miss Sean and Leanne talking as they're talking over food and they're having a conversation. And we see Dorothy comes home a little bit early as Sean was a little bit nervous that she was going to be upset, but she didn't realize that they were communicating. And we get another 2 a.m. scene. This time it was really cool because we get this POV of Dorothy kind of walking upstairs like Michael Myers, looking over Leanne as she sleeps. She pulls the blanket behind. It's the doll. It's, again, the doll, the simulation of that, the kind of the connection and parallels between that doll and that mannequin, Jericho. I think there's a lot of parallels there, but we see Leanne hits her over the head. She tries to run out of the Turner's house. The door is locked. They start to have this conversation as Dorothy asks her where Jericho is, and we see Leanne tells her the following: he's in a better place. He's surrounded by people that love him. We keep him warm and happy and safe. And those words just triggered Dorothy as she hits her and knocks her out over the head. I thought for a second that she was going to kill Leanne or that she killed her with his hit. Nonetheless, we cut to Sean. He's waking up with pain. He now has his taste back. He has his feelings back. He's shouting, Dorothy, where are you? He finds her lingering over the door, covered in mud. He puts two and two together as he goes upstairs in the attic and see the mannequin laying in there. He goes straight to the basement. This is dark here. Dorothy has completely lost it. She just wants Jericho back, and she's willing to do anything, even if that means killing Leanne. We find Leanne in the basement with a hose out of the ground so she can breathe. Sean digs her up out of the ground. Dorothy looks at her and says that she is willing to do whatever to get this information back. And It's just a really dark scene when we see that. And I think Sean just has to step in. He has to realize that his wife has lost it. Like something has to happen with Dorothy and Sean because she is losing her mind. We end the episode on Dorothy going to bed, or I should say Leanne is, she's taking a shower at this point and washing off everything. We go back to seeing Dorothy in bed. To her looking over the baby crib. It's now 2 a.m. and it seems like me in that moment that she realizes what happened to Jericho. End of the episode. What a great episode. The tension was there. The creepiness was there. Again, are those workers tied to the lesser saints? Are they underground? The symbolism between the attic and the basement, heaven versus hell. And Dorothy's kind of right in the middle. She's losing her sanity. She's losing her humanity side. And it is really dark. Sean, not only is Dorothy starting to get her memory back, which I can't wait to see what the next episode looks like of her remembering what happened. Sean now can taste. He can now feel things. What does that mean in regards to the relationship between Sean and Leanne? He feels more sympathy for her. So does that mean that we're going to get this rift in the house? A lot to look over. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. I thought, again, episode 3 and 4, back-to-back great episodes. The Shyamalan family has done a great job, and I can't wait to see what they have in store for us next week. But let me know your thoughts, your pros, your cons, and your theories in the comments. As always, make sure to like the video, share this video, give it a thumbs up. It means a lot to me. Subscribe to the channel and hit the bell. That way you don't miss any of my other content on this channel. Hope you all are staying safe and you enjoyed this review, and we'll see you on the next one.